Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NorthStar Community. So good to be here and glad all of you are with us today. Again, I'm guessing if you're here listening to me, you are in recovery either at some form, either you're thinking you should start thinking about recovering from all the craziness in your life, or you're somewhere on the journey, or you're quite a ways down. Wherever you are, welcome. And so it's we've been talking about toxic shame. And so we can continue to do that today. And it's always so much fun to have these positive, wonderful subjects we talk about. But it helps us because our goal is to be aware. It's to be aware of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and then once we become aware, we can start doing something about it. And so toxic shame is one of those insidious things in our lives. It's like a vapor that lives in us, and it just wrecks us from being able to move on with our lives. And so I think it's so important for us to remember that toxic shame is so existing in our life, and it creates so many problems. And so again, we'll talk about it, but I want to read this. This is Luke 7. And this is the, so there's a lot in Luke 7 going on here. The first thing that happens is John the Baptist has been imprisoned, and he's, been the guy kind of out there talking about Jesus, and he's excited about, he baptized Jesus. And so John's in prison, and so he has some of his disciples come back to Jesus and tell him, what's all going on and everything. And so they tell Jesus, said, John sent us to you to find out, are you the guy? Are you the Messiah that we've been waiting for, or should we be waiting longer? So think about that a little bit, how important that is. So John the Baptist is questioning this. So it's important for us. I think it's always important for us to hear that when we're on our journey to recovery and with our toxic shame, we're going to question lots of things. And, a lot of us probably have some difficult religious upbringings that are different than what the Bible said or meant. And a lot of times we take one little part of the Bible and do all these things. So John sends his people back and says to Jesus, are you the guy? Are you the Messiah, or should we wait for someone else? And this is Jesus' answer. He goes, the blind see, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the wretched of the earth have God's salvation, hospitality extended to them. Is this what you were expecting? Then count yourselves fortunate. So you hear that Jesus, it's the wretched of the earth. Let's be honest, that's a lot of us, right? We're, all the stuff we're doing and not doing and should be doing and all that. But the fact is, people were reaching out to him. The people who reached out to Jesus were the ones that he could do so much for. And so after John's messengers left to make the report, Jesus said more about John to the crowd of people. What did you expect when you went out to see him in the wild? A weekend camper? So you know the story about John, right? He's out there living in sheep or whatever it was. I can't remember what sort of skins he was wearing. He ate locusts and honey. So he was a pretty crazy guy. And we probably weren't expecting a weekend camper, were we? Hardly. What then? A sheik in silk pajamas? Is that what you thought you were going to get? Not in the wilderness, not by a long shot. What then? A messenger of God? That's right, a messenger. Probably the greatest messenger you'll ever hear. He is the messenger, Malachi announced when he said some things. And so what's important here is that it's us extending ourselves out to God, and God is there for us all the time. It's just us seeing it and hearing it. And that's why gratitude is so important. So that's what leads to this story, actually, and this is about the harlot or the prostitute who came to the Pharisee's house. And so let me read this because it's one of the most moving. To me, I love this one probably as much as any. So one of the Pharisees asked Jesus over for a meal. He went to the Pharisee's house and sat down at the dinner table. Just then a woman of the village, the town harlot, having learned that Jesus was a guest in the home of the Pharisees, came with a bottle of very expensive perfume and stood at his feet, weeping. raining tears on his feet. So in spite of what we try to do in Hollywood and things, if you're a prostitute, there's a whole lot of bad stuff's happened to you, and it's happening to you. This is not a glorious thing. It's terrible. And I would think even back this time would have been even worse. This woman is broken. She is spiritually, emotionally, physically broken. To have the courage to walk into a Pharisee's house and see who she considers the Messiah, that come to him broken. What a courage. What a courageous moment. It's what we need to learn from in our recoveries. That's how we get recovered. Letting down her hair, she dried his feet, kissed them, and anointed them with the perfume. When the Pharisee who invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man was the prophet I thought he was, he would have known what kind of woman this is who is falling all over him. Or maybe that's who Jesus prefers, with the people who are broken and falling over him. You know, I heard one time someone was lamenting that people that come to church, like, I can't remember what the percentages were divorced, and the percentage of them that were struggling in their life. And I'm like, I hope so. I hope our churches are full of these broken people, because that's who we all are. We're finally starting to get honest about things. So Jesus, of course, being Jesus, he says to Simon, Simon, I have something to tell you. Simon said, oh, tell me. 2 men were in debt to a banker. One owed 500 silver pieces, the other 50. Neither of them could pay up, and so the banker canceled both debts. Which of the two would be more grateful? Simon answered, I suppose the one who was forgiven the most. That's right, said Jesus. Then turning to the woman, but speaking to Simon, he said, do you see this woman? I came to your home. You provided no water for my feet, but she rained tears on my feet and dried them with her hair. You gave me no greeting, but from the time I arrived, she hasn't quit kissing my feet. You provided nothing for freshening up, but she has soothed my feet with perfume. Impressive, isn't it? She was forgiven many, many sins, and so she is very, very grateful. If the forgiveness is minimal, the gratitude is minimal. Then he spoke to her, I forgive your sins. That set the dinner guests talking behind his back. Who does he think he is, forgiving sins? He ignored them and said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Isn't that a beautiful story? And I think it's such a story about recovery. Her recognizing her brokenness, her recognizing the pain that she's in, her recognizing the stuff she's suffering from, and she went and had the courage to go right through very difficult setting, a Pharisee's house, which would be very, very difficult to do, with what people knew about her, and then she had the courage to go to Jesus and weep in his presence and love him. And so he responded, of course, the way he always does, with such love. So, having trouble getting my talk up here, so hang on for a minute. So, I'm going to make a big leap here to the subject today. I just talked to you about what I think is one of the most beautiful stories in the Bible, to the subject of worthless. When we're in recovery, one of the things that we do very well is we see ourselves as worthless. And you know, the point is that in some ways, it's kind of true. We have wrecked our lives. We have caused more problems. We've created more issues. We've done all these things. But what I hope you hear, think about this lady who was a prostitute. And again, think about, as I understand, being a single woman, a prostitute back then is mind-blowing, about how difficult, what a world of survival, horrible, horrible life. And of course, you know how, again, we always kind of have that bit of we forget about the other part of that, of the guys going to her, right? You know? So I just hope we can relate to her from a recovery point of view. If we're in recovery, we are struggling, we are suffering, we are in pain, and it's hard for us to face it, but that's what we have to do. And so one of the reasons for us talking about toxic shame is so we can understand our awareness so that we can see it, see what it does to us, and we can move on. Because we don't have to be addicted to toxic shame. We can be healthy. We can have a rich, full, meaningful life. We can have things that we never dreamt of peace. Could you imagine waking up with peace and waking up that day not feeling anxious and troubled and all those things? I mean, we can do that. It actually is a part of life if we can get ourselves in recovery. But when we're in recovery, we are hiding, we're protecting, we're pushing back on anything that will help us to become better and feel better about ourselves, because we just don't know what that means. So I love this statement here. Toxic shame is self-perpetuated brutal tyranny, and that's what it is. We are our own worst enemies. We have so many. We make life so hard, and it's so painful. And the problem is that it builds on itself. So I grew up in my childhood, I create toxic shame about myself. You go into my young adulthood, things happen because of my toxic shame from before. I add to that toxic shame. It just becomes an endless cycle if we don't understand what we're doing. And that's why I'm so glad you're joining today, because once you start becoming aware of your toxic shame, you can do something about it. And so make sure, we talked about this before, but I'll recover this again. So there's a difference between healthy shame and toxic shame. Healthy shame is necessary, it's healthy, it's important. What it does, I don't know about you, I hate feeling shameful. Like when I've hurt somebody, either on purpose or accidentally, I feel shame. I don't like it. I don't want to do it again. So that's the purpose of shame. It directs us to do the right things. It reminds us of the values we live. It reminds us of the value of connection, all those things. So healthy shame will help me not make the same mistakes over and over, though I'm a bit hard-headed, and I know some of you are too. But the point is that's one thing. I made a mistake. I need to do something different. I need to fix it. I need to do my amends. I need to not do it again. That's healthy shame. Toxic shame is much more deep-rooted. It's deep-rooted in inadequacy. I see myself as a mistake, and that's what's important to understand here. It's just internalized. It's transferred to our subconscious. You know, think about all of you out here who have had post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm guessing the majority of you have, or if you're in recovery. And I find it's so amazing. And guys, I'm not trying to be sexist here, but guys, we are the worst about this. It's like it's a pride thing for us to say we don't have PTSD and we don't have any, we just suck it up and be tough, right? When the fact is, I think everybody's got some levels of PTSD. I'm not telling you to use that as an excuse, but I'm telling you to recognize it. Because guess what? If you can recognize what PTSD does to you, you can do something about it. So what's the symptoms of PTSD? I get agitated. I become aggressive. I have broken relationships. I have substance abuse. I create all sorts of issues in my life. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't know about you, but that's not rich, full, meaningful life. And if those things are happening to you, you can do something about it, right? So what we do with toxic shame is we internalize our shame. And then we understand the physiology here a little bit. If we have a lot of toxic shame, our epinephrine and our norepinephrine is going to be too low. We're going to have low energy. We're going to have high anxiety. We're going to be depressed. And the other part is the cortisol levels. If we're walking around with a lot of toxic shame, our cortisol levels are probably too high. Cortisol is for us to survive. That's what it's for. Again, if I'm sitting here and suddenly one of these speakers falls on my head, I need to move. That's cortisol. Cortisol will get me mobilized and move fast. But if I'm living with that all the time, I see everything as a threat. I see a hard look from someone that's all about me. Someone cuts me off in traffic. They did that to me, when the fact is they probably didn't. Someone walks by me that doesn't see me. I assume they didn't say that to me. They didn't say hi to me because I'm worthless and I have too much toxic shame and everybody sees it. See, that's what this does to you. We don't want that. So you got to get your cortisol levels down, and the way to do that is you got to recognize what you're doing. So with toxic shame, kind of three things we do. We have atrophy thinking, which means we are an incessant, mean, all the time condemning ourselves. we find more ways to condemn ourselves and to shame ourselves. That's atrophy thinking. It atrophies us. The other thing is we don't see ourselves as enough. We're never enough. No matter what we do, we can do 1,000 things right, and it's still not enough. There's still something wrong. We weren't perfect, blah, blah, blah. So you see how atrophy thinking, not enough, comes together. And then let's add in the theory that I need to be mediocre. I cannot possibly think about the thought of being successful. And I'm not talking about finances here. I'm talking about emotionally, spiritually successful. And you know, maybe you might be a little more financially successful. I've seen people destroy themselves financially because of toxic shame. I know people who, in anger and hurt, throw away more money than they ever thought of, right? Because of that. That's toxic shame. But that's what I'm talking about here. So think about mediocrity. Like I always kid about, at NorthStar I always kid about when I talk about we need to create passionate purposes. They're just like this chorus of groans in the room because that's just a foreign language to us to have a passionate purpose because we're so busy surviving. We're so busy hiding our toxic shame. We're so busy making life tough on us, it's hard for us to move forward. So, and the other problem is I always talk about, think of a bar. You got a bar right here, and below this is mediocre or below. Above this is better, good. Anytime we get above that bar, we get uncomfortable. And if we're not aware of it, we will sabotage ourselves and pull us back down to that mediocrity. So all I'm telling you is we all have things we're good at, and there's things we're not so good at. But the point is we can have a life that's rich, it's full, and it's meaningful. The problem, of course, is that we see ourselves as not good. And then what happens is we create these limits in our life. We either live with too many limits or we live limitless, right? Like I was using the example of Johnny Carson, one of my favorite people, all messed up, but he's from Nebraska, so hey, I gotta love him. But his mother never, just to see interviews with her, she was so cold, so mean, probably is a better word, and I suppose she was protecting herself. I don't know what it was, but he never could please her. And I was telling a story the other day about they showed a video of her. They asked her how she thought her son Johnny did his first night or something, and she goes, he's okay. Could have been better. Right? That's what he lived his whole life. So he drank too much, womanized too much, all those things, became angry and resentful and bitter. He, probably the most recognized man in America, died alone in his hospital bed. He had alienated everyone from him. But an example of his limitlessness, he smoked like, I can't remember, it was 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And he actually believed that he was going to be the exception to the rule and no cigarettes were not going to damage him. And he died from emphysema. But he believed up to the end that he was above that. That's limitless thinking. That's not real. Or, when I just can't help myself and I use too much, or I get online too much of my compulsive behaviors, or I become obsessed with someone and I just overwhelm them. That's living limitlessly. That means I'm going to do what I want to do when I want to do it, and there's going to be consequences, but you know what? I'm not worthy enough to worry about that, and those things are going to happen. On the other hand, I live too limited, and as I don't believe in myself, I'm fearful to try new things, I don't trust myself, I don't value myself, so I live way below the bar, the mediocrity bar. So all this none of it's good. Living with limits, too many limits, or living limitlessly harms us. And toxic shame is what does that to us. It tells us we're not important or we're different, or we isolate from people. We don't have good people in our lives. We feel weak. We feel scared. I mean, I could go on and on. I've known people who have purpose. They said I wasn't trying to kill myself, but I was living very recklessly for a reason because of all the trauma had been in my life. Let's not forget the Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey. If you score a 6 out of 10 or more without intervention, you will die on average 20 years younger than someone who scores a 0 on the ACE. I don't know what else I need to tell you to give you an example of limitless. Why is it that people die 20 years younger? A, they're going to abuse more drugs and alcohol. B, they're going to live more violently. C, they're going to go out and they're going to live their life recklessly. These things all contribute to death. And the statistics are getting worse on this. People who are in their like 30s, the 50s now, one of the leading causes of death now is drug abuse. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's a problem. And what goes with that? There's more violent deaths now. You see what I'm saying? Where all this stuff is about limitless. When I live my life and I think I can do whatever I want. There's no consequences. That's limitless. On the other hand, I don't do anything in my life because I'm not good enough. It can go both ways. And so the fact is here, what we have to begin to understand is that we're human. We are not God. It's not, and it doesn't matter what you've done. It matters what you're going to do now and moving forward. And it's not so much what we've done or not done. It's how we've interpreted what we have done. And what I always talk about, I think you can relate to this, is we are so forgiving of other people. But man, when we do the same thing, we are so hard on ourselves. We judge ourselves so harshly. That's an example of that. If someone cuts me off in traffic, in my toxic shame mode, I'm angry, I'm aggressive, I assume they did it because it was me, right, when it really wasn't. But if I'm in a less toxic shame mode, I make mistakes, they make mistakes. That's what happens, right? And a question for you is, what beliefs do you carry around with you that keeps your toxic shame going? You need to recognize that, because until you do, you're not going to get better. So let's talk about this today. I did all that just to get to here. Worthless. What a word, huh? Don't we all want to think that? But you know what? If you have toxic shame, you believe you're worthless at some level. You may also have wildly grandeur thoughts, but the fact is you don't feel like you're okay the way you are. You don't feel like you're lovable the way you are. And you know what? Really for all of us, but you know what? To a degree, we probably are worthless. We can't be great at everything. So I'm going to read a quote here. So yes, you really might be inadequate in real life. Your life has been a failure. And it's because all along you've had the same feeling of not being good enough from the first issues in childhood through adolescence, school, work, and now. It spiraled downhill to the point where the issue is not that you feel bad, but that you literally are bad. Your life is literally inadequate. That, people, is toxic shame. So the harsh truth is, we're all worthless in some ways, right? I grew up hearing that I was not able to fix things. I was not able to have control on when things broke and blah, blah, blah. And I was judged for that, right? And my wounded self heard that, and so I never really got myself involved and understand how things worked. And it's not been good. But the other problem with, if I feel like I'm worthless, maybe there's some truth to it. So let's do something about it. That's the point here. It's not whether you do or you don't feel worthless. I think we all do at some levels. But what happens if we said to ourselves, you know what, I need to work on some things. Right? Because what happens if we feel worthless and never attempt it, what are we going to do? We're going to have self-fulfilling prophecies. We are going to sabotage ourselves over and over again. We're going to remain mediocre at best. We're going to never feel not like we're good enough, and we're going to completely have a campaign against us all the time. So let's be honest. Because of us with toxic shame, because of our addictions to substances, to people, to compulsive behaviors, all these things, we probably have screwed our lives up in some ways. That's why you're sitting here now listening. But it's okay. We've probably had a long line of poor decisions. Good Lord, I can think of times when I was so insecure, the things I did to myself to keep me down and all those things. I'm sure we all can relate to it. So what we got to get to here is the explanation is not enough for people to accept that we aren't really fundamentally flawed. What we have to hit them with is that this is not unchangeable. This is not a lifelong, permanent condition to be inadequate and to despise ourselves and to see ourselves as worthless. And let's be honest, our insecurities can be pretty brutal. They can be pretty brutal. But again, it gets back to the same thing over and over and over. Face the shame, face our pain. We've got to do it. We have to become aware. You can't become aware if you can't face it. I think about, I've had people come to me. They have so repressed their feelings because of shame that they they start to diagnose themselves as autistic, or they diagnose themselves as a borderline personality, or maybe I'm a sociopath. If you're coming forward and you're trying to recover, pretty good chance you're none of that. What it means is you're starting to understand toxic shame. You're starting to understand what it does to you, and you can move on. We talk about oftentimes, it's so good to understand this. It's called alexithymia, and it's caused by a lot of trauma, caused by a lot of stuff that goes wrong in our lives. And the problem is, I just cannot tell you what I feel. I don't know what I feel. Well, guess what? If we don't understand what we're feeling, we're not going to get better. And we spend so much of our time protecting ourselves by not feeling anything. So our brain's divided into two places. And again, a lot more to the brain than this, but let's make it simple here. So the neocortex is responsible for thinking, analyzing, reasoning, processing. If you're an engineer, you're good at this. That's what neocortex, you're really good at this. The limbic system, on the other hand, is responsible for emotions, senses, memories, and motivation. Now, the point is, we're stronger one way or the other. My limbic system is much stronger in me. Other people, the neocortex is much stronger. But the fact is, if they're not working together, you're not going to make good decisions. And you're certainly not going to make decisions about yourself that make sense. So guess what happens when things go wrong, when we get stressed, when things really hit us, when we become abused, when we become abandoned, when major things happen in our lives? We do what they call neurogating. And what do? We slam the gate shut between the two sides of our brain. It's a survival method. Our brain thinks it's doing us a favor by shutting us down one way or the other. And what it does is it inhibits our pain. So we don't have to feel so much pain in the moment. But guess what? We need both sides working, right? I always remember one time when I was working, I was like an organizational psychologist, and so they called me and we're having team issues. One time I was telling the director was very neocortex driven. I mean, it was goals, roles, procedures, this way, but a lot of his staff were much more on the limbic side. And so they were complaining to me about how, the meetings were cold and nothing, all did was complaining and stuff. So I said to him, well, maybe what you need to do is recognize the human element a little bit more in your meetings. I get you got to get these things done, but recognize that your team might need, some more of that. And he goes, all right, so what I'm going to do, we'll have 5 minutes for people to talk about them, and then we'll go to our meeting. I went, I think you missed the point. But you get how he's missed the point. His neurogating, because his stress was high. He was in a high-pressure job. He didn't have time for the niceness. He needed to get things done. But it doesn't work that way, right? So that's an example of him neurogating, right? So we have to open the gate. How do we do that? How do we open this gate so we can quit being so mean to ourselves and maybe become a little less worthless, right? We have to become aware. It's mindfulness. We have to do it. I don't think you can do that on your own. You can do it on your own if you have others in your life. Then yes, you can. But for me to sit down with a massive amount of toxic shame and the feelings of worthlessness I may have, I'm probably not going to be very good at mindfulness. I need others around me as well. I hope as you hear me talk, I keep in the Bible over and over. I try to find the stories, the scriptures about how God loves us. He loves the broken. He loves us. Again, if you read Jesus' life, his parables, his actions were for the broken. He was fighting with the quote-unquote church people. I just hope we keep getting this. God isn't judging you for all the stuff you've done. He understands your heart. He knows it. It's you that doesn't let go. It's you that feels the guilt with God. God isn't keeping score with you. God loves you. And sometimes when you're the most broken is when you're the most available. Radical honesty kind of goes back to mindfulness. You cannot get past toxic shame and feelings of worthlessness if you aren't radically honest. You have to face your past, and you have to figure out how this is creating issues now. It's like we talk about this all the time, isn't it crazy that I'm carrying shame with me from 45 years ago? I mean, just from a very logical point of view, that makes no sense, but I am. And I have to tend to that and realize that. And the other thing is we have to embrace powerlessness. That's what that woman did when she went to Jesus. She was broken. She was powerless. She had the courage to go to Jesus and say, love me, forgive me, I am broken, I am powerless. That is why I love that story so much. And here's what I love about this. If when we admit our powerlessness, we have nothing left to fear. We can quit hiding all that stuff we're hiding. We can quit every time I talk going out, wait a minute, are they going to figure out who I really am? If we go and we let go of all that stuff, we don't have to uphold false standards or maintain a false image. We no longer have to be trying to control everything or be perfect. We don't have to justify everything. We don't have to create excuses. We can just embrace us and our shame and the people around us who will be there to help us. It's called support groups, people. As Craig Ferguson, the comedian, so humorously says, you can find it in the first part of the phone book if you can't figure out what you're looking for, right? But when we're powerless, we're humble to the core. We have nothing left to lose. We have nothing left to fear. The only fear we have, of course, is that people are going to hurt us. But if we're in support groups, it's not going to happen. Think about it. By feeling the pain, trying to avoid it, by saying I'm worthless, by saying that there's parts of me that I'm not a good person, I've got to change what I'm doing, that's when you can free yourself from the menacing grasp of all these actions. And just think about it. When you embrace powerlessness, the freedom you will feel will be amazing. I'll have people tell me, like I'll talk to family members of people whose children are acting out in lots of substance. They're addicted and they're out there creating havoc. And I'll say, well, I hope your best friend could be 911. Call 911. Get them arrested. Get them on a DUI. Whatever. Get them. And they go, I don't want them going to jail. I go, they're already in jail. Their prison is much worse. And with toxic shame, when you start saying that, you can say you're imperfect. You can say you're worth whatever it is you need to say. You can say you're flawed like every other human being. And then our goal is just to become decent human beings. That's the goal of support groups, nothing else. When we live our lives humbly, we can start to understand what's important. We can be there for others. We can let go of our fears, all the irrational thoughts. So I'm telling you today, take the action. Get yourself somewhere to support you. God loves you. You don't have to live in privacy and hiding and secrets. I'm certain I'm telling you to tell the right people. Don't just go out to everybody. Find the people in your life, because the great saying is we are sick as our secrets. When I'm living in toxic shame, I am trying to hide the worthlessness, the guilt, the shame, all the pain, all these things. When what we're saying is the beauty, if you don't release yourself from all this and become a rich, full, meaningful life, is let go of the secrets. Because I can tell you, if you came to one of the things that kills us, and this is part of our toxic shame, is that we actually think we're really special and unique, and what we've done or going through is way different than anyone else. And what I think is the most liberating moment for people is they come into a support group meeting and they start to tell their story, and they think everybody's going to be awed by it, and they're all going, yeah, exactly. That's what I did, or that's what I experienced, or that's what such and such. What do you want? Do you want to live feeling worthless? Do you want to live your life hiding, trying to hide all the secrets, protecting dysfunctional families? So we could go on and on here. Or do you want to recover? You can't do it by yourself. I've never seen it happen. You can argue with me about it. I know people have quit, but I've never seen people who've recovered, because there's a big difference. I don't know a lot of people. I know a few people have quit and without recovery, and they're the most miserable people on the planet. Recovery means we get ourselves back without the toxic shame, without the feelings of worthlessness. We feel powerless in the right ways. We understand a God who loves us and forgives us. We know we have people in our lives who care about us, who want what's best for us. And we might even find that rich, full, meaningful life. You never know. It's there if we want to take it. You have to start somewhere, guys. I don't know how to say it to you. It's not working for you now. Get out there and do some stuff. One of the things that I think, and I will tell you, the one thing to do, this is easy. Write down 3 things you're grateful for every day. If you'll do that, your life will change instantly, and I don't know how to say it to you. When I write down my 3 gratitudes, I can feel a physiological change in my life. I can feel my cortisol levels drop a little bit. You get my point here. It's a physiological, spiritual, emotional thing to do. And don't think them, write them down. So I'm so glad you guys joined me today. A little long-winded today, I apologize, but it's so good to be here. It's so great to be in recovery. I just can't think of any place else I'd rather be, because we get to see the miracles of people's lives who change because of this, because of the recovery. And you know what the beauty is? I tell people this all the time. When you get recovered, this is how God works. It's amazing the number of people that get put in the way in your paths that you can help them with recovery. It's a beautiful thing. I love recovery. I'm so grateful that Walnut Grove Baptist Church allows us to be here and do this. It's being in the community in the right ways. There's a huge amount of issues going on right now. Anxiety levels are up 150%. Depression levels are way up. Substance abuse is way up. We don't even need to talk about compulsive behaviors, all that stuff going on. But we don't have to live that way. We don't have to let that control us. That doesn't have to be our prison. We can actually have that rich, full, meaningful life. So just reminders again, we meet on Wednesdays and Fridays at 6:30 here at Walnut Grove Baptist Church. Also Sunday mornings at 9:30, we have a small support group there. We have this service, of course, at 11:15, but you can view this at any time on YouTube and Facebook. Next week, NorthStar Community will be hosting the service, so I'm real excited about that at 10:15. So thank you for joining today. God loves you. And we always close our meetings with a prayer of serenity, and so let's go ahead and do that today. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great week.